think of the days where we had to have somebody taking notes on every meeting. Well, it's done
Right.
automatically for us now. So there's really no excuse for not having meetings, not having going through these different things, not communicating. Oh, I'm not going to be there. That's okay. Let's hop on a Zoom call, or let's hop on a Microsoft Teams call, or whatever the case is. It doesn't matter what platform it is. It just matters that we're continuously communicating about the goals of the business and about what we're doing to make our customers' lives better, because that's the promise that we make in each of our businesses.
Welcome to Biz Help for You, the show that saves you the expensive learning curve by providing advice from industry experts in every facet of the entrepreneurial journey. Too many small businesses collapse. According to the U.S. Census Bureau, 20% fail within their first year, and less than 35% make it to their 10th anniversary. The goal of this podcast is to change that statistic. So if you're interested in learning more to be a successful entrepreneur, tune in today.
Let me tell you a little bit about my guest today. Pete helps business owners transform from operators to owners by using a variety of frameworks that cut through the chaos and overwhelm of running a business. With 29 years of experience refining his tips, tools, and techniques in his businesses, he loves sharing his knowledge to help others live the life they deserve as business leaders. You can learn from Pete's practical framework and long-term experience to effectively transition from managing daily operations to focusing on strategic growth and leadership. So Pete, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me, Candy. I'm excited to be here with you and your listeners today. And, as you read that intro, it's interesting that, you said 29 years. And here, as we're recording this, in another month, it'll be 30. And boy, does time go quickly. I can't believe it.
Anniversary. That's awesome.
Thank you.
Well, talking about that, though, too, I would love for you just to share your story of how did you become an entrepreneur?
Candy, it's sort of in the family, as you hear this a lot, but it sort of is in my case. My dad he didn't own the company, but he ran a fairly large construction company for someone who had multiple businesses, and Dad was the principal sort of operator of that one. My mom was a school teacher, and when she decided, and my parents decided that they would stay at home when they had my sister and I, or she would. And, through the time we were young, she was very entrepreneurial. She would make crafts and sell them to craft stores, and she was buying and selling stuff. And, she was just, Dad was sort of the managerial side of things. Mom was sort of the entrepreneurial side of things. And so many of our relatives are business owners, farmers, retailers, a variety of different things in the family. So I had lots of great mentors that were actually, family and friends and family and friends of family that, encouraged me as early as, 12 years old to get out there and start doing some things for myself. And then through high school and university, I had little lawn cutting and landscaping businesses and things like that. After university, I bought my first franchise in 1994. And that's, 30 years ago now. And I was literally today, before this call, I was talking to the owner of that business. And he basically said, you had it for 15 years. I've had it for 15 years. So it was a bathroom renovation company. We also had a cleaning franchise that we bought with 30 clients and grew to 300 and sold it. So we 10 times that one. I was a business broker helping people buy and sell businesses, which is where I found one of the businesses that we currently still own, which is called Shootopia. So we own, at that point, it was one store, but we have a couple stores now here in Ontario, Canada. And so we have a couple of shoe stores, had since 2010. And, part of the progress of what I've always done, I've usually had two businesses. I call myself sort of a multipreneur. I've usually almost all my career had two businesses on the go. And the idea here, and what I help most of my clients with, is really getting out of working in your business on a day-to-day basis, making all the decisions, making all the calls. And I couldn't have had two businesses at any given time if I was making all of the decisions for just one of them even. So from that perspective, a lot of what I do these days is coaching. And I work about a day a week in my shoe stores now, sometimes more depending on the needs. But a lot of what I do now is really coaching other people to, get to that point where sometimes they're either frustrated, maybe even want to sell their business because they're so frustrated and tired of making all the decisions and things like that. But the idea here is that you don't have to do everything. And we get, part of the journey is small business owners usually aren't very heavily, I'll call it, funded off the bat, and they usually have to make all the decisions. But 3 years, 5 years, 10 years down the road, as business grows and does better, they've been habitualized in making all the decisions and don't let them go anymore because they've always had to and they feel they still need to. So there's a bit of psychology around that. But, that's one of the things that I've always done over my 30-year career. And it's pretty much what I coach to now, Candy.
Well, I agree with you too. I think a lot of times, as you say, when someone starts a business, they can't afford to have someone working with them. So they're doing everything and, of course, making all the decisions. And then at some point, if they do bring someone on, they may think, well, they're not going to do it, the same way I am or as, good as I do or whatever, and so they don't want to necessarily hand it off. Or they might think, it's going to take me too long to train someone, so I'll just do it myself, right? Yeah. So, what would you say then to the person who's hearing this and saying, well, I hear what you're saying, and I don't necessarily want to be doing all of the things in the business, but I'm not sure how to start stepping away. What would you tell them?
Well, I'll use a little example that is pretty, I think, relevant to most small business owners. And let's use payroll as an example. If you're doing payroll every 2 weeks and you've got a crew of, 10 people or so, and if you're not outsourcing payroll really and kind of, writing the checks or doing the direct deposits or whatever the case is and doing all of that sort of work, it's taking you probably a couple of hours to do that every 2 weeks, which if you think of it over a year long, so let's say 2 hours times 26 is 52 hours of your time, which is a given, basically a week of the year you're spending in payroll. And people say, oh, I can't give up the time or, all this other stuff around not being able to get this done or not being able to transfer this to someone else. But if you spent 5 or 6 hours doing all of the things you need to do to get this all down and handed it off to somebody else, you would be able to spend that 5 or 6 hours to get 52 hours back. Why wouldn't you do that sort of thing? And there are so many areas, bookkeeping, purchasing, so marketing, so many different areas in your business. If it's not truly your passion and the thing you love to do in your business, then let somebody else who is passionate about that side of the business do it. Because first of all, they'll probably do a better job than you're doing. They'll probably do it more efficiently. They'll probably hooray when they get things right, as opposed to you looking at payroll going, oh, I got to do payroll again and all this kind of stuff. I mean, I call it working in your love it zone. And as the business owner, you want to work in your love it zone, and you want everyone else in your team to work in your love it zone as much as they possibly can, so you can have a good culture at your business and a business where everybody's really working in that zone of genius that's making everything properly.
I totally agree with you on what you just said too. And even the payroll example is a perfect example because I actually own a bookkeeping and payroll company. We do all of this for other clients, but I was doing my own for my staff too. And I'm to the point too where I was like, well, I need to be able to have the business run without me in case something happens, or if I want to take a vacation, I don't want to have to worry about it. And so that is one of the tasks I've actually handed off in the last few months. And of course, I first demonstrated how to do it. Then I supervised her doing it, and I had recorded it while we did that. So if she had a question, she could go back, and we had instructions, it was all written out. But she has now run it 3 times on her own for me, so I haven't even had to do it. So it's a great example of something that can easily be handed off. People are sometimes afraid, but it can easily be done. So I'd love to get into the topic, though.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, I know you have this concept you call CPA. Right? Communication, process management, and accountability that goes along this whole, discussion of what we're doing to help people get out of the business. So I'd love for you to just talk about that. What is it really, and how is it going to help the entrepreneur so that they're not doing all of the operating in their own company?
Yeah. I think, Candy, and CPA, being that you have the background, the accounting background, it's not your chartered professional accountancy, right? But it's still a mastery of skills as a business leader. And the mastery of skills, like you said, mastery of communication skills, mastery of process management skills, mastery of accountability skills, all the things we've started to talk about here over the first 5 minutes of the call really have to do with this. And if you think of being the business leader that you want to be down the road, I'm talking to you, the listener, you know, if you can spend a little bit of time each week working on each of these skills, think about how much better your business will be 3 years from now. Because your number one job as the business owner or the business manager is to communicate the mission and the promise of your business. And so that everybody's in alignment with why you're doing what you're doing, how you're doing what you're doing, and who you're working for, so that the money can continue to come in. And when that happens, you have to deliver, and so does your team. So in order to deliver, you really have to hone your process management. And there's a whole sort of philosophy around process management. But I can tell you one thing that I've seen over the years with small business owners is that a lot of the process management in their business is in their own personal head. And that's a problem. So you mentioned the idea about I did the video. You know, people learn in different ways. So when we do start working with process management, and I'm a certified Kolbe coach too. So from the Kolbe perspective, people learn, communicate, understand, and make decisions in different ways. And so when we look at process management, we need to have things written down for people that like to read. We need to have things in video format when we possibly can. I love Loom and all of these tools that allow us to share our screen and kind of point and click and go through it as we're talking through what needs to be done to do that payroll or to write that purchase order or whatever it may be. But then once you have that video, you can take the video and transcribe it. And when you transcribe it with something like Otter or any of the tools that do transcription for you, that's fantastic, because you can take that transcription and throw it into another tool like, say, ChatGPT or one of these other ones. It doesn't matter. I'm sort of tool agnostic around this, but the idea is the flow of process management starting to happen here. And when you take that transcription and you put it into something like ChatGPT and you give it the prompts and say, write the process manual for this video, it will write the process manual probably 70 or 80% effective to what you want it to be. That means that you only have to tweak it out 30 or 20%. Attach that to the video. Now you have it in audio, you have it in video, you have it in legible form for people that want to read. Share it in a drive where people have access to, which is very easy to do these days with something like Google Drive or Dropbox or any of these other facilities where people can search and find what they need, so that they can actually get the thing done without you being involved. And you're communicating. This is part of the communication, setting up proper meetings, making sure everybody knows what they need to do, allowing the ability for the process management to be housed in an area that can be found easily. And the accountability portion is the portion where you're literally assigning this duty to someone, like you did with your bookkeeper, to say, hey, can you take care of payroll now that I'm going to go away for a month? And so these kind of things need to happen and it takes some time to start getting this stuff going, Candy, as you probably have seen with all of your customers too. But it gets a little bit addictive too once you start doing it, because when you see things start to happen and people start to do things for you without you being involved and they're being done properly, it's like, I kind of would like a little bit more of this, because it means have a little bit more freedom than I've ever had before. And that's one of the things we like as business owners. We want to have a bit more freedom.
Right. And it's not even just about the freedom. Like, maybe someone is thinking, well, I'm not planning on taking, a big vacation. It's no big deal or whatever. But it's not even just about that. It's that as the owner, we're often the bottleneck. Yeah. Right. And so from my perspective too, I would tell my staff, like, we need to get some things off my plate, because if everyone is reaching out to me and everyone needs me to do certain things, I only have so much capacity myself too. Right. Sure. And so then things stop with me, and we don't want that to happen. And so that's what we're working on too, is having other people learning some of the things that I had done originally, because I don't have to do all those things. They can learn them, and then they have the ability to grow in their skills, and they're empowered as well too. So I think overall, some people may be afraid of delegating and handing off, but not only does it give you freedom if you want to take time off or an emergency arises, but your staff feels empowered and they're, happy to be participating in your company in that way.
For sure. I'm a certified exit planner, Candy, and a lot of the work that I do is around helping people set their business up for either family transition. I do a lot of family transition
Mhm.
stuff, or for sale. And part of that process is having all of the process in place, the accountability in place, so that you can clearly show a potential new owner the lines of how everything works in this business without you being there
Mhm.
as the current owner, because they have to picture it as them sitting in that seat. And when they're sitting in that seat, does everything still get done without the old owner being around? And I'll tell you, when we look at transition, about 50% of the businesses in North America transition because people want them to. The other 50% is because they have to. And
Mhm.
that's the problem that I encourage everybody to think about here as we're going through this, because there are a few things that cause business transitions, and they may not be planned
Mhm.
transitions. One, and it's a big one, it's death. What happens if you die? Does the business continue on, and does that affect your family legacy if it doesn't?
Mhm.
That's a big one. Divorce, another big one that happens with one out of every two marriages failing. Divorce is there, and it causes businesses to be sold or to close.
Mhm.
Disability, even on a short-term disability. If you couldn't talk for a week, or were unconscious, or if you broke your hip, and all of these different things, depending on the business that you're doing, um, all of these things can cause dire consequence to a given business, depending on the amount of time you're away.
Mhm.
And disagreements. If you're in
Right.
partnership with another person, what happens if their partner wants a divorce, or if they pass away, or if a variety of other things happen? So all of these things, when we work through communication, process management, and accountability, and we have backup plans and cross training, and all of these other things, it not only makes your business more valuable from an exit planning side of things, but it also makes it more in control for you, the business owner, as you continue to run it.
Mhm. Well, I would love to dig even a little deeper into, the CPA. And so I would like to first to talk about obviously communication,
Yeah.
and we know what that means, right?
Yeah.
But a lot of people feel that they're really not able to communicate well, and they're nervous a lot of times being in a leadership position. So what would you tell them about how can they improve their communication skills to enhance their leadership and be able to train their other staff and get that communication going where the staff also has what they need through the communication process to take on these roles?
There are so many fantastic tools, even within the last couple of years, that allow us to communicate. We use, I'll just go through some, like a flow of what I would use with our shoe stores. So, for example, we have a yearly couple of day meeting with the management team. We now meet quarterly, once a month, offsite, or sorry, quarterly, once a quarter for a full day offsite. And then the alternate months, the other 2 months of the quarter, we meet for a half day offsite. And then we, on a weekly basis, meet for an hour, and that can either be on site or on Zoom. And then every day we use a tool called Voxer, and Voxer is a voice app on the phone that we use, and we just tell each other our three prime priorities of the day, so that each of the management team knows exactly what they're working on each day. So our prime priorities, those three prime priorities that come right down to the day, feed into your weekly goals, which feed into your monthly goals, which feed into your quarterly goals, which feed into your yearly goals. And part of the communication of a leader is that you're always holding all of these things in place, communicating what those goals are to the entire team that's held accountable on your accountability chart, so that you're flowing through that. So there's a variety of, some people, like I said, people learn and speak and communicate in different ways. So you have to have it in a variety of formats.
Hmm.
And I think Zoom is an awesome tool if you're working remotely, and it in person is great. But even if you do in person, sometimes it's good to have it recorded, because we can take a recorded meeting, and all of the AIs now will even do notes for you off a recorded meeting and give you your to-do lists. So there's so many advantages of taking advantage of the AI tools and these different things now that allow us to clearly write down. Think of the days where we had to have somebody taking notes on every meeting. Well, it's done automatically for us now. So there's really no excuse for not having meetings, not going through these different things, not communicating. Oh, I'm not going to be there. That's okay. Let's hop on a Zoom call, or let's hop on a Microsoft Teams call, or whatever the case is. It doesn't matter what platform it is. It just matters that we're continuously communicating about the goals of the business and about what we're doing to make our customers' lives better, because that's the promise that we make in each of our businesses. And it's, how are we making their customer, what's their pain? How do we uniquely fix what their problem is so that we can give them a better life? That's the promise of your business. And if you're communicating that always, then all of your team is going to know, and your customers are going to know what you do, and the door is going to keep ringing, and the till is too.
Right. Well, moving on to process management then too, obviously you need to have processes in place and allowing staff to understand what those processes are. So like, what would you say then to the entrepreneur again, who is saying like, well, this sounds great, but I don't know where to begin. How do I actually create these processes?
You can start off by creating the very easy ones. And I'll go back to our shoe store. So what do we do at the shoe store? Well, when we open the door, we turn on the lights. We have a series of opening procedures. Well, ChatGPT can do that series of opening procedures for a retail shoe store. If you just ask it a question, what should I have on my checklist? It's probably going to get that 50, 60, 70% right. It gives you that starting point, because getting started on process management is the biggest thing. It's like 70% done if you just get started. The procrastination happens usually because I feel like it's an overwhelm just to get started on it. So the beautiful thing now is you can get this going with something like ChatGPT and ask it the question, get this along. So I'm starting to build this process document that I'm going to then make in a checklist, potentially, depending on what the process is. I'm going to put it into a video form, all of these different things, but then it needs to be clearly communicated. Here's the other thing I find, Candy, around process is that people can have process documents and they can have them in all sorts of forms. It doesn't matter. A lot of process documents I've seen over the years are still sitting in the back of people's trunks, because that's where they live. They have to be searchable. They have to be understandable. They have to be, you have to be able to repeat that particular process, and it has to be executable. So if they can't find the process when you're not there, that's a problem, right? And so they have to be able to easily find whatever it is they need to tackle so that they can actually complete that process for you without you being there. It's such an important piece of the business. It's such an important structural piece to the value of your business. And again, I don't have a whole lot of hair for anybody who's watching on video. I've pulled it all out in my earlier years of business. But, it's one of these things. If it's all in your head, how could you ever expect anybody else? And what you kind of said earlier, one of my favorite questions, when somebody comes and asks me a question, what I will respond to them is a question of my own. And I'll say, what would you do if I wasn't here?
Good question.
So I say it all the time. And I don't have to say it as much anymore, because we do have good process in place, and we do have good accountability in place, and things do happen without me being involved. But, at those early stages, the idea was, what would you do if I wasn't here? Because often the people that are doing this know exactly what to do, but they're coming to you because you've always answered the question for them. So what I do more often than not now is anybody who's already accountable, let's say for a purchase order, if you're doing purchase orders, you probably know better than me, because I haven't done purchase orders in a long time. So I have them create the actual process, and we go through the whole get it in written format, in video format, all the other things, and then we'll go together and verify that. And they usually use me as the guinea pig because they're like, oh, Pete hasn't done a purchase order in forever, so let's see if he can do it.
Make sure there's not a step missing.
Yeah. So I'm the guinea pig a lot of times, and that's part of process management. Is you need to have other people who don't do that process regularly run the process to see if it's actually going to work.
Right, exactly. Also, like what I've done too is sometimes when we've done the written instructions is taking screenshots too. So
Yes.
again, if someone is visual too and they like to see the pictures, but they don't want to have to watch the whole video again to find that one thing, that's been really helpful too, because you can like scan through the document. Oh, that's what I needed to remember. I think that's
So
really
good.
helpful too.
And something like Otter often will even take the screenshot now and apply it wherever it needs to be within the document. I mean, there's AI tools are getting so good now with some of this stuff. There's no excuse for not having good documentation anymore.
Right. But like you said too, like put it in and maybe, get out the outline or something and then fine tune it, because it's not going to know necessarily everything specific to your business or a specific customer maybe, but you can maybe have the outline to
For sure.
fine tune. So the third thing that you were talking about is accountability,
Yeah.
right? So how can business owners then get their staff to take accountability so that, again, they make sure that everything is consistent? It was the way that the owner wanted it. If it doesn't have the capability of being tweaked, sometimes, there's more than one way to do something. But if there's a specific thing that has to be done a certain way, how do they then have their team take accountability for that so that it is meeting the company goals?
I don't know if you have experienced this, Candy, with your clients, but one of the things that I experience with so many small business owners is they don't even have a up-to-date accountability chart or organizational chart, or they don't even have one at all. It doesn't matter if you're a 3-person team or a 10-person team or a 50-person team. Everybody needs to know where they stand on the accountability chart, because that's the line of communication. That's the line of accountability that happens in your business every day. And if it's sort of a gray area, no wonder things aren't getting done, because nobody is assigned to that. Okay, who's the head of marketing? Like if I have a marketing question, who should I go to? Because if you don't have that, they're always going to come to you as the business owner, because there is no line of sort of accountability set in place. So with every new hire that we have, we update the accountability chart every single time, and we post it for all to see, so that everybody knows if they started yesterday and or if they've been with us for 7 years, where are you, and who should they talk to if they have a question about human resources, if they have a question about sales, if they have a question about their anything. It's always there, it's always clear, and it's always outlined as far as accountability. Because one of the big things is that when if there's no accountability chart, everybody's always going to go to the top. And
Right.
the other thing I see a lot of is that people try to bypass levels of accountability. So let's just say we have the owner and we have another layer in between of, say, manager, general manager, whatever the case is, and then we have assistant manager or sales team or whatever the case is. Sometimes the salespeople will try to bypass the general manager, let's say, and go to the owner because they already think they know what the general manager is going to say and they don't like it. So they want to actually get around that general manager and ask the owner to see if maybe they can work around and get a different answer. So one of your jobs in communication and in process and in accountability as a leader of the business is to reflect that back down the accountability chart. If somebody's trying to bypass, and I will do this all the time, if somebody's trying to bypass, a salesperson on my team, for example, is bypassing me, asking me a question about payroll, I would say, well, have you talked to Michelle yet? No, I haven't. I said, well, Michelle's in charge of payroll. Like, got to talk to Michelle first. And I leave it at that. And when you start reflecting back down the accountability chart, whenever anybody comes to ask you a question about something that's no longer your accountability, they won't come to you anymore.
Right. I had to do that yesterday with someone who came to me with a sales tax question for a client. And I said, well, did you ask Emily? And I said, I'm actually in the middle of something and she probably can answer it for you, so we've had to do that. But I think it's also been, you have to get your staff used to that too, because they were used to being able to come to you. And so maybe out of habit, they're just thinking, well, I'll just go and ask them, so we're still working on that ourselves too, because this doesn't happen
that's
overnight,
normal.
Obviously.
I think that's normal. But the more you answer those questions, like, what would you do if I wasn't here? Or have you talked to X person who's actually in charge of that? And it's listed on the accountability chart and everybody has access to that. Like, she's in charge of marketing. Why are you asking me? So, these are, and most often I won't even have the right answer anymore because that person is in charge of marketing and they do know more about that particular thing than I do. So I don't want to give them the wrong answer. And two, I don't want them bypassing the person who's actually in charge.
That's a great point. Well, I know this has been a fun discussion. There's so much more we could be talking about on this topic, but I know we're running short on time. So I want to ask first, do you have an offer that you would like to extend to our listeners? And also, how can they contact you if they want more information?
Well, one of the things I call it the 10 laws of moving from operator to owner. And it's just a little PDF download that you can catch on my website at Simplifying Entrepreneurship. I know that's a long one, but Simplifying Entrepreneurship /laws, LAWS. That would be that's sort of pertinent to our discussion here today around if you want to get out of making all the decisions in your business and move into that operator's box on the owner's box, out of the operator's box on the accountability chart. And how do you get a hold of me? Just go to my website at simplifyingentrepreneurship.com and you can get a hold. You'll see all sorts of other free downloads there and a little bit more about what I do. I hang out most of the time on Instagram and LinkedIn, so I'm over there too if you're a social type person.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Pete, for being a guest on my show. I really enjoyed our conversation and the information that you were sharing with our listeners.
Thanks so much, Candy. It has been an absolute pleasure, and I really appreciate you having me. Make it a great day.
Thanks. And to the listener, if you enjoyed today's topic and you want to hear additional information, you can find access to exclusive content in the show notes. Thank you for tuning in today. Would you please share this episode with those you know and leave a review on your favorite platform? And if you find our show informative, would you consider being a financial sponsor to help me continue my mission to educate business owners? A link is located in the episode description, and no amount is too small. I'd really appreciate your support. If you are interested in connecting with our guest and receiving the offer they had to share, a link to our resource page is in the show notes. Finally, if you have any bookkeeping or payroll needs, reach out to us at 310-534-5577 or contact@abandp.com. My team and I are eager to assist you. Until next time, have a great day.
Thank you for listening to Biz Help for You. Please join your host, Candy Messer, again next time. Have a terrific day.